105.5 WDHA here on the Jersey Magazine. My guest this morning is Dr. Rupert Hayles Jr. He is the president of Pillar College. Dr. Hayles, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Jim. I am so glad to be here and so happy that you were able to allow me to be on the station.
Well, I think it's an important topic that our listeners are, I'm sure, well aware of, and it's been in the news of late over the past few weeks, the shortage of teachers here in New Jersey, and it's had wide-ranging effect. What do you think has been the underlying causes of this shortage, Dr. Hayles?
Well, there's a lot of research out there. According to the Department of Education, we have about 500,000 teachers that are shorted. And the reason why we have shortage of teachers, primary reason, is burnout. But not only burnout, they cite the fact that teachers have low pay. And so that's kind of one of the things. And coupled with low pay, we know that most teachers are mainly females. And with the economy, there's change and expanded opportunity for women. So that's also leading to an exodus. But not only that, degrees in teacher ed is also low. So you put all those factors in, and then, back in March of 2020, the big one, COVID just came in, and then, all of a sudden, people kind of, you have the great resignation across all industries, but also in the education.
One of the things I noticed about COVID, and obviously every industry had to do this, but teaching in particular, I mentioned to you before we came on to do the interview that my wife has been a teacher here in Morris County for a number of years, teaching at the elementary school level, mostly kindergarten. She did second grade for a little while. Teachers in not just New Jersey, across the country, literally changed the dynamic of how schools ran overnight. When COVID hit in March of 2020, my wife thought, we'll be home for 2 weeks, we'll be back. Well, 2 weeks turned into a lot longer than that. And watching how these men and women literally overnight just changed the game. Dr. Hayles, that was fascinating and inspirational to watch.
Okay, two things I'll say about that, Jim. One, at Pillar College, the same thing occurred. I mean, we're no different than any other school. The fact of the matter is, our online presence was limited. And I remember at a board meeting a long time ago, somebody said, we'll never be online. And then COVID hit. All of a sudden, in 6 weeks, we had to change everything. We had to, implement new technology. Not only, it's one thing to implement new technology, but everybody has to learn it. And so you have a wide variety of teachers, some who are really technologically savvy, and some who, they don't really care for it. And everybody had to pivot to you. So to your point and your wife, the experience has been tremendous, but not only that, the students have to change. And so you see, now all of a sudden they're in the class, that now they're online. I have two young 11-year-olds, twins. And I just, my wife just saw it and experienced it, realized that even parents got, affected by this. So everybody got affected by it, but the teachers, it really impacted them, and they did yeoman's work, and they should be compensated. They should be recognized for the work that they do to pivot to make sure that this thing.
You mentioned having two 11-year-olds. My wife teaching kindergarten had some rather unique experiences. Mrs. Monaghan, watch, I can do a cartwheel. Or the parent in the background saying, Anthony, you're in school. You have to wear a shirt.
Yeah. And all these nuances, nobody thought about that. But all of a sudden, the stuff you never thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. We're speaking this morning with Dr. Rupert Hayles Jr. He is the president of Pillar College here on the Jersey Magazine at 105.5 WDHA. We were talking about the teacher shortage and how so many teachers, there are women and not that many men. I didn't even have a male teacher until 8th grade, and that's quite a while ago. I went to an all-boy Catholic high school here in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any female teachers, so that was a real change. But elementary school, all the way through up until 8th grade, didn't have one male teacher. What do you think is the reason that men don't go into teaching?
I would say it's a couple of reasons. One, the fact of the matter is, I mentioned to you before about women and generally in the educational industry, the pay is lower. For male, they have greater opportunities and they want to take advantage of it. Secondly, the fact of the matter is it's tied into pay too. 9 times out of 10, the folks that are going to school, they have student loans. They have a debt to pay. And so you balance, service to the community versus paying off my debt. And most people said, hey, I got to take care of this because this affects my lineages. So some folks just, and the male figure, obviously, from, not intentionally, but they tend to be the primary breadwinner until the change in our economy. So all of these things just kind of add up where male just are not in the classroom for various reasons that I just quoted to you.
How did you get into education? You came from the private sector. What was the path that led you into education?
I came from the private sector, but I always had an interest in school. I'm an educator by art. I told my wife when we were getting married, one of the things I said to her, because she's also it's a degree from NYU, I said, give me a library, give me a campus, and I've always been that way. And just recently, last year, the president of Phillip College was stepping down, and I was the chief operating officer, and the board asked me to step up. And so, I didn't plan it, but in mind, you have a desire, and God was able to meet the desire, and so I'm here.
For DHA listeners who might not be familiar with Pillar College, the main campus is in Newark, and then there are educational locations in Somerset, Patterson, Plainfield, and Jersey City. One of the things I did want to talk with you about is a critical need, not just for teachers, but for Black men. And you're doing something really extraordinary in that. Tell our listeners about that, Dr. Hayles.
Well, the fact of the matter is, what their driving force is why you do certain things. And the fact of the matter is that, as an educator, obviously research matters to us. And we know that Black male who have at least one teacher in the classroom are 13% more likely to go on to college. If a Black student have two teachers in their classroom, they're 32% more likely to go on to college. And having at least one Black teacher between the age of, between the 3rd and the 5th grade, reduce the Black student probability of dropping out by 29%. You get these statistics and say, whoa, something has to be done. And not only that, in addition to that, if you have Black male teachers in the classroom, your testing on standardized testing increases. We recognize, and I saw that, and so you correlate that with a teacher shortage, and Pillar College is saying, okay, what can we do about it? We recognize that in the areas we serve tend to be urban, as you just highlighted them, except for maybe one or two. And so how are we going to touch the community? How are we going to reach out to the community? We decided to start the program B.E.S.T. And B.E.S.T is what I call Black elementary school teachers, and focuses on Black male precisely for those statistics that we can help people to we want to make sure they can get into college, but beyond college. And one thing I'll say, Jim, a quote by Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said, the greatest way to attack poverty is through education. And we're in the education business. And the areas we serve tend to be underserved. And so what better way to serve your community than putting this program in place?
We're speaking with Dr. Rupert Hayles Jr. He is the president of Pillar College this morning here on the Jersey Magazine at 105.5 WDHA. Let me go back to COVID for just a second.
Yep.
One of the things that I think came out of COVID was an appreciation for blue collar workers, if you will.
Yep. Yep.
For people who were, a trade. All of a sudden, those guys came into big demand because if your toilet's clogged, you need somebody. How do you think that translates with the need for higher education? Learning a trade versus higher ed.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is, no matter what you do, and I gave that quote about Nelson Mandela, it really doesn't, every single person needs to learn something, right? And in order to learn something, you need to be educated. So whether you're, a blue collar, whether you're white collar or what you say it is, we're positioning ourselves so that we can train people. If you recall correctly, back in the day, there was a lot of what we call outsourcing, sending people overseas or sending their jobs overseas. And there are certain jobs you couldn't send overseas. For example, you couldn't send a doctor overseas. You could send the x-ray review, but you couldn't send a doctor overseas. And one of the things out of that study says, if you want to guarantee your job, make sure you're either a plumber or a firefighter. I mean, literally, because those you can't send overseas, because you mentioned that's the practical application. And I think the trades also are very important. We have to make sure we can train people so that they can get educated, whether it's in colleges or whether it's in the trades. We have to make sure that they're educated.
And once again, Pillar College has launched the B.E.S.T Black Elementary School Teachers for Men program, which will award 10 full tuition-free scholarships for their BA elementary program to qualifying individuals. This is like no other initiative here in the Garden State. Dr. Hayles, for DHA listeners who want to learn more about this, where do they go?
If they want to learn more about it, it's two ways. One, you can go to www.pillar.edu/best, and you'll get information on the program. I was doing another interview, Jim, and somebody said to me, well, Rupert, what happens when you get beyond tech? And we said, you have a limited resources, so then you pivot to, there are people out there, and in our brochure, there are people out there who have a real heart for this. And they want to say, okay, I can sponsor one Black student, or I can even sponsor a group of 10, what we call a cohort. And so we say, if you want to do that and you're touched by that, go to Pillar College, but go to www.pillarcollege.edu/giving. And so we want to make sure people who want to go to interested program, go to what we call BEST for information, but also go to /giving, the two ways, because we want to extend beyond this 10 to make sure we can go 20, 30. We just had what we call a open house about this program, and 100 people showed up on the open house. Sometimes you be careful what you ask for, because now they show up, now it's like, okay, what are you going to do? And so we're reaching out now to donors, and hopefully we can get some people to give, so that, because this program is not like this in New Jersey anywhere, and we want to make sure that we can somehow attack this potential problem there.
And just to clarify, Pillar is spelled Pillar. So Pillar.
Yeah, here.
Dr. Hayles, thank you so much for your time. It's a fascinating topic, and I wish you the best of luck with this program. I think it's fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, thank you so much for allowing me. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk to your listeners. And I went on site looking you up, and thank you for all the work that you do and continue to do it, because you're a blessing to the people in New Jersey.